Thank you to all of our sponsors. This film is being sponsored by Stuart Karievsky and Susan and Richard Kogan. Thank you very much. And thank you to our friends from JCC Central for joining us tonight. Please put any questions you have for our guests into the chat box, and for optimal viewing, please use speaker mode. We're so lucky tonight to have the co-writer, writer, and producer of this film, Gerald, Peary, and Amy Geller. Jerry is the writer-director of 2 acclaimed feature documentaries, For the Love of Movies, The Story of American Film Criticism, and Archie's Betty, both of which played at film festivals, museums, universities, and were televised on WGBH Boston. He was a veteran film critic for the Boston Phoenix and acted in the 2013 feature film Computer Chess, which premiered at Sundance. Currently, Jerry writes reviews for the website The Arts Views and is the programmer of the Boston University Cinematech. Amy Geller, co-writer and producer, has award-winning productions such as PBS's The War That Made America, For the Love of Movies, and The Guys Next Door, which she co-directed. And they've been broadcast and screened at prestigious film festivals around the world. She served as the artistic director of the Boston Jewish Film Festival and teaches production courses at Boston University. Welcome to both of you. Thanks for being here. And I just have to say that it was such a treat not only to view the entire film, but also see a different part of the country, especially now, while we're stuck, many of us stuck at home, not being able to travel. So I saw the film twice, and my first question is, what was your inspiration?
Okay, that is my question. It started with my desire to make a film which had something to do with my own Judaism. I'm a very secular Jew, but I identify very strongly as being very, very Jewish. So what could that be for a film? What do I really like, especially about Judaism? And I thought and I thought and I thought, and I realized mezuzahs. I am mezuzah crazy. We have a mezuzah on our front door, of course. And so I decided I wanted to make a film about mezuzahs. So I went on the internet and I read everything in the world about mezuzahs, books about mezuzahs, movies that have scenes about mezuzahs. Maybe it was going to be the mezuzah movie. And then one day on the internet, I came across this true life story, which is about Chaim Brook, a rabbi in Bozeman, Montana, who has this mission to put a mezuzah on the door of every single home in the state of Montana. And Montana is huge. It is like where we live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, from Cambridge all the way to Washington, D.C. And Chaim goes around the state putting up mezuzahs. So we thought, boy, that's interesting.
Every single Jewish home.
Every single Jewish home, right. So I called him up on the phone. He answered, and I said, hi, we're filmmakers in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Could we come out and watch you putting up mezuzahs? And Chaim said, okay. So we got on a plane, Amy and I, and a camera person, and we'd never been to Montana before. We looked up the great big sky. We met Chaim, but we had no idea what was going to happen after that. Amy.
This is usually my part. So we thought we were going to make a short film about this, Orthodox rabbi in an unlikely place like Montana on this mission to get a mezuzah in the home of every Jew in the state of Montana. Great short film. And then we arrived and discovered that he was married, and we knew that he had a wife, but we didn't realize that he had adopted 3 children at that time. We also didn't know that there was another synagogue in the same community, and we didn't realize, of course, that there was tension between the Chabad synagogue and the Reform synagogue. So tension is always good. Conflict is always good for documentaries, especially longer ones. So the film kind of grew, and it very much became what you see on screen, what the audience sees is sort of what we learned on the journey of making this film. We didn't have a particular agenda when we set out. We knew almost nothing about Chabad, to be honest, and we learned a lot in the process of making the film, both in the field, interviewing people, but also reading and doing research. And so what you see in the movie is essentially the journey that we went on.
So you actually didn't really have any point of view going into filming. you just went in trying to see, you know, how many mezuzahs he could put on the doors, and it went from there?
Yeah.
We were more curious, I think. You know, I think that's how I tend to approach films. That's my style as a filmmaker, is just to be open to, you know, we knew that based on Jerry's conversation with him that he was smart and funny, and he had, you know, he had a good response. And when you make documentaries, people don't necessarily understand this, but you're casting. You're trying to find good subjects to be in your films. And so it's not like you're casting actors exactly, but you're casting a subject that has to be able to hold the screen and has to be interesting for a long period of time, right? Or enough to hold the attention of the audience. So we just knew he would be a great subject, even from talking to him on the phone. And then, of course, when we met him in person, he was all that and more. And yeah, and so we didn't really have an agenda. I mean, we definitely had a lot of people in our lives, mostly secular Jews, who, you know, had a lot of misconceptions about Chabad. And we didn't have a lot of knowledge about it. So some of those misconceptions might have been our misconceptions as well. But we really, you know, again, what we learned and sort of and the time frame with which we learned it is sort of how we laid out the movie.
How long did it take you to film the entire film?
3 years. 3 years. So the point of view question. We know that there have been a lot of films about the Hasidic world, and they tend to be like made by people like us, secular Jews, and they often are very, very negative about the Hasidic world. And I think when we say we don't have a point of view, that sounds a bit wishy-washy, but it was more, I think, that we were cautious about going in with preconceptions. You know, these people are crazy, they have these big beards, that's not our kind of Judaism. And we really wanted to learn about Hasidism, and we wanted to learn especially about Chabad, because that was a particular kind of Hasidic rabbi that we had, and about Chabad outreach. So we tried. A lot of documentaries come in with I guess too much of a point of view. Whereas people are on the plane, they already know exactly what they want to prove, and they find everything to prove that point. And we as documentarians have our credo, our aesthetic is to let things evolve and find out what we think as we watch things happening. So I use the word wishy-washy. We are very opinionated people. We are not wishy-washy at all, but we still took a step back and let the story go out. And I think we both, as journalists, but we also believe very strongly that it's good for audiences to make up their own mind. It's very easy to make a documentary in which most people, you know, go to a documentary because it's exactly what they believe, and now their belief is affirmed. And that's a bit lazy. So it's much more interesting, I think, to see a documentary in which you are stretched, in which your point of view is challenged. And I think, you know, for most of our audience, which is like us, pretty secular Jews, I think you were stretched and challenged a bit by our film. We hope so.
So June Schechner would like to know, Amy, did you know that the rabbi wouldn't shake your hand, and did it create any ill will toward him or Chabad, or was there any sort of uncomfortable situation that surrounded that first meeting?
You know, I don't remember back how I knew that he wouldn't shake my hand, but I was aware that that was, you know, an issue for him. So I basically respected that boundary. Maybe initially I was a little uncomfortable with it, but as I got to know him and as I began to realize that he saw me as a person, and I was, you know, he listened to what I had to say, he answered my questions, he took my direction just like he did with Jerry. He was very open to me as a director. And as a woman, I didn't feel uncomfortable, but you know, I do understand there are women in the film who talk to this issue. You know, I think if I wanted to be a rabbi, and that was important to me, then, you know, that path is not available to me in Chabad. And if I wanted to be a cantor, you know, that path is not available to me in Chabad. So there were things that I was very aware of, and you know, I think that's part of Chabad. And, you know, we learned that some people are comfortable with that in Montana and some people aren't.
Were there other like obstacles to filming? You went out knowing that you were going to film, you know, the Chabad, and the rabbi's family, but then you met Ed Staffman and Rabbi Rostin, and were they eager to jump on board for this? Was Rabbi Bruck wanting to share the spotlight, or he just wanted it to be about him?
Well,
Good question.
Well, the interesting thing is that nobody was at ease when we filmed them. It didn't matter if it was Chaim, or it didn't matter if not a single person in the film welcomed us, because they correctly understood, everybody's media savvy, that we could sell them out, that we could take their point of view and change it and make them look weird. So nobody knew what we were going to do. And so, so that was a big thing. So as people now looking at the film and deciding, like Chaim went from being, welcoming us at first, but also being suspicious and also not understanding why we kept coming back 4 or 5 times. He thought we'd be there once, goodbye. Why are you here again? You already asked me that question. You want to talk to my family again? I don't know. So everybody had that suspicion. But Chaim now himself loves the film and thinks that we were very, very fair. He said this often, that anybody who is a Hasidic person believes that media is out to get them every single time, and most of the time they are. So he was completely surprised that we were very, very fair in the movie, which we always promised, and that even though we include criticisms of Chaim, we also let him answer the criticisms. So he's a fan of the movie. I think the other rabbis both feel that they are treated very fairly, that they get their best arguments, but they probably would like the movie to be more about them than about Chaim. What can I say? If Chaim was the second person, I'm sure he'd feel the same.
So Carol Mann wanted to just remind people, if they didn't know, that Rabbi Rostin, before she went to Montana, was the rabbi of Congregation Bethel in South Orange.
Yeah.
And actually, there was also a follow-up question from Stan Shapiro, I don't know if Stan's on, that he read that Rabbi Rostin left Montana after the anti-Semitic outbreaks. Do you know where she is? Like, do you know anything?
In Montana.
I think she's, as far as we know, she's still in Montana. And she feels really strongly about staying there. It's her home. It's where her, where she lives now, and she's committed to staying. Although, obviously it was an incredibly difficult time, and she still struggles with PTSD. But no, as far as we know, she's still there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we actually, I think Carol was asking, did we know about Francine? No, we actually didn't know about Francine before we started the film. We met her. There was a big, you see it in the film, there was a kind of a association, like a meeting basically of the Montana Jewish congregations, and we met her there. And then we sort of discovered who she was, and we talked with her, and obviously she was an incredibly important person in the state of Montana. But she had moved there fairly recently. So we hadn't met her before the start of the filming.
Yeah, and I think the fact that she is in the film is probably the biggest challenge when Chabad people watch the movie, because, as we say, there are no Chabad women rabbis. So
she moved there from our area. She was a rabbi in South Orange.
Right.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah.
And she's been there for 8 years, and when she decided to move there, we were all going, why are you going to Montana? There are no Jews in Montana. And this is exactly what she got, She got a self-fulfilling prophecy, It's like.
But there are Jews in Montana, as she said.
Not,
There are Jews everywhere. One of the great lines in the movie is when Francine says, there are Jews in Montana. There are Jews everywhere.
And unfortunately, there's anti-Semitism everywhere too, as she's also said. I don't think that's in the movie, but when we talked with her, no community is free from that, right? And we unfortunately, it's a scary time. So I think my sense of Francine is that she's really a fighter, and that she's not stepping down, not walking away, not really committed to the community there.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry you left your community.
Fred Bennett asked if it's your understanding that Rabbi Chaim wants to convert Jews to Orthodoxy or Hasidim, or just to identify more Jews.
I'll do that
Yeah,
one.
go ahead.
Yeah. So this is one of the misconceptions people have who are not in the Chabad world, and something we have learned. Chabad is not trying to convert you to be a Hasidic person. That is not their interest. In Chaim's 12 years that he's been in Montana, only one person has become a, quote, more religious. That's not their interest. So when you go into a mitzvah mobile, there's no worry that you're going to come out with a big beard or being kidnapped by Chabad, as people believe. But the idea is to, quote, make Jews more Jewish, more aware of their Judaism, pray more, light candles,
Become kosher.
do every mitzvah in the world. That's what the object is. Why the object? That is what's pretty weird to people like me. The real reason I want you to do all those things, at least one of the reasons, is that the Messiah will come. And so if someone like me who doesn't believe the Messiah is going to come, that's an argument I have with Chaim often. I say, I don't want the Messiah to come. He says, how can you not want the Messiah? Because as flawed as this world is, I don't want a Messiah. This is where we are. So we have a different position than Chaim, and we have a continuous friendly argument because politically and ideologically and spiritually we're pretty far apart, and yet we also really get along well with him and his family and feel great about it in this very divided world that we can get along so well.
Okay. Claire Nirenberg asked, what has been the impact on the Jewish community of Whitefish since Chabad has arrived? If you know.
We only know a little bit.
A lot, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the new Chabad seems to be doing well. Absolutely has taken some of the people who were Francine's people have now moved over there. But we have not, our film is finished. We're not at the moment doing a sequel. That would be a great thing for the sequel to see literally what happens. So we, of course, want Judaism everywhere. So our hope is, we don't think Chabad should be shut out, nor on the other hand do we want anything to happen to, a beautifully running shul, which is the one that Francine has. So
the Glacier Jewish.
Yeah, so we want Jews everywhere to be happy going to wherever they want to go.
Robin Polson wants to know if it was difficult managing the discussion on camera between Chaim and Ed.
Yeah.
You want to answer that?
Oh, go ahead. You can set that up.
Well, the only scene in the movies which we set up was that one. Our rule as journalists is to let people decide themselves. We'll follow them. We're not telling you what to do. But that one, I said, please, we would like you two rabbis to talk about Judaism. Neither of them wanted to do it. They did it as a favor for Amy and I, but very reluctantly. And I guess the discussion is just what you saw. Within a minute, they were completely burrowed into the discussion and defending their positions in an unbelievably articulate way. I think we are especially proud of that scene because I don't think there's any film in the history of the world which has a Orthodox rabbi and a Reform rabbi in a real substantive discussion of a bunch of really important issues to Jews, and they both, I think, do wonderfully in articulating their position. So that's a little time capsule. We have more of it. If we ever do a DVD, we'll probably put a lot more of that debate because people seem to really like it and savor it like we do.
And I can see on the chat that people are some people felt that Rabbi Chaim didn't come off so well, and I'm sure other people would feel differently, and that's one of the really interesting things for us as filmmakers is that scene is kind of a
litmus test.
Yeah, litmus test in terms of where audiences fall. So it was really fascinating to be there as filmmakers and really exciting. So thank you for all your comments about that scene.
I'm going to ask Ava and Steve to ask their question.
Okay.
You guys there? Ava
Hi.
and Steve.
First of all, I thought the documentary was very well done.
Thank
My
you.
comment, I have two comments. I thought the Reform rabbi was very unfair to him, even before the interview. When they had that rabbinic council, he criticized them for not coming and not praying with them. And you would think a rabbi would know the reasons why he couldn't pray in mixed company. And then he also said at some point, he doesn't want to be a part of the community, and Chabad's not like that at all. Chabad rabbis around here go into Reform Hebrew schools. They teach the kids how to make shofars. They teach them how to make matzahs. Like you said, they want to teach them how to be better Jews, and it doesn't matter whether they're Orthodox, conservative, or Reform.
Right, thank you. Okay, Ronnie Brown wants to know what was the reaction of the townspeople when meeting Chaim and his fellow rabbis?
Don't quite understand the question.
Townspeople. You mean the non-Jews?
Can somebody explain the question? We're happy to answer it, but we don't
I don't see.
quite
Oh, I see.
understand.
Okay, what was the reaction?
Did you see that?
Yes, the non-Jewish people, when
Oh.
they met with they went into the town and they were meeting with, I guess, the officials in the town or people in the town. They obviously weren't Jewish.
Yeah, well, anyway, Chaim is very well loved in the town of Bozeman. He has a lot of non-Jewish friends. If you are married to someone who is not Jewish, bring that person to the shul. If you have friends who are non-Jewish, bring them to the shul. It's a very, very open attitude. The scene, if you've seen the film, where you see there's the service in downtown Bozeman. A lot of the people in the crowd are Christian. They're friends of Chaim who just love him and wanted to be there. So,
but Chaim will also tell. I mean, we've only been to Montana a handful of times, so we haven't gotten the depth that he has from living there for 10 plus years. But he says that the state is very libertarian state, and people are just very much live and let live. So it's as long as you don't bother me and come onto my land, however you want to live, you can live. So there are obviously, pockets of anti-Semitism, but like we said earlier, unfortunately, they're everywhere. There is a little bit of a kind of survivalist, there are pockets of survivalist folks out there, people who kind of live off the grid. As you can see in the scene, guns are very popular in the state, but it's not just Republicans who have guns. It's also Democrats. It's just that's part of the culture, which was very foreign to us and pretty shocking, to be honest. And I think, many of you may have been shocked by that scene as well. So I think by and large, the Jewish community has been embraced, but, there have been anti-Semitic incidents over time. But the wonderful thing that's been consistent is that even though there have been, anti-Semitic attacks against the Jews of Montana, every single time the rest of the community has come out in support of the Jewish community. And, they've put menorahs in their windows, even if they're not Jewish, and they've, they belong to these organizations that sort of support everybody getting along, and it's really, it's not what we anticipated, to be honest. We had a lot of misconceptions about what Montanas would be, and we were quite surprised and pleased, actually. So
I don't, was this answered? Does Chaim actually own a gun? Do you know?
We don't know if he owns a gun. We don't think he does. I think we asked him that, and I think he wasn't going to get into it specifically. But yeah, I mean, the guns that he was shooting in the film were not his guns. They belonged to actually another Jewish person who's in that scene. He's a part of the Chabad congregation. His name is Seth, and he was the one who was teaching them how to use these semi-automatic weapons. But yeah, those were not Chaim's personal guns. So we don't know.
Eileen Manahan was very impressed with the documentary, and she thought it was very informative, and she calls herself a mainstream Jew. She's especially interested in knowing whether this is the same philosophical conflict in accepting the Chabad mission and approach between Chabad and conservative and reform clergy elsewhere, especially here in the Morris, Essex area?
Well, that would be interesting to hear from all of you. I mean, we obviously focus specifically on Montana, and I think what we've discovered is that every community is different. In some communities, Chabad seems to get along with the various other Jewish organizations or congregations in those cities and towns. So it really seems like it varies community to community, and some of it has to do with personalities, and some of it has to do with the fact that in a place like Montana, the Jewish population is so small that there's such competition, whereas maybe in a community where you all are, there's many, many more Jews, and so there's more Jews to go around, so to speak. But I don't know. I'd be curious to hear what people's experiences in your community.
Well, June Schechner actually works at the Friendship Circle, which is run by Chabad. And she said that her rabbi has a lot of charisma and he's very involved in the community. So,
and it was like we were given a deck of cards when we sat down. So it's not, what we saw is it's not a metaphor for everything. These are literally the rabbis who were there. And the rabbis who were there quarrel a bit. We could, I think as Amy said, we could have gone to another state and the rabbis get along. We just literally filmed what we saw. That's what you saw.
Right. A few people asked. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I just wanted to add on to that about the community. I am a member of a study group with Rabbi Bayer, who's professor emeritus from Congregation B'nai Israel in Millburn, New Jersey, and he's a conservative rabbi. And often, if he can't make a particular lecture, he'll ask Rabbi Solomon, who's a Chabad rabbi from Shore Hills, New Jersey. And the two of them have this give and take between the two of them, but yet Rabbi Solomon will not go into well, now he's retired, would not go into his synagogue. He would only meet with them outside of the conservative synagogue. Because then by going in, he would recognize that such a thing exists, and in fact, that Bayer is a rabbi. So they have this friendship, but there's this like fence between them in terms of what Solomon is willing to do and what he's not willing to do.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Thank you, Stan. Thank you. How does the rabbi fundraise to support his family beyond the Chabad seed money? And were you there to experience any of Chaim's fundraising efforts?
Yeah, so basically he fundraises through the community of Montana to start. So it's like any organization that's fundraising, right? You start with your core audience, which is who's in front of you and who you serve, and then you go out from there. So he has people that he went to yeshiva with, and he asks them for support, and I guess there are grants that you can apply for. So they're just like raising money for film. You raise it where you can. But there has been this misconception that beyond the seed money, and we just found out that actually there is no more seed money for Chabad. That's what we were told. But Chaim did receive seed money to basically buy his house and set up a shul in Montana. But after that, he and Javi are responsible for raising their annual salary every year. So it's a lot of fundraising, and he does a lot of events. So we were there for one of those events. There's actually several of them. Hanukkah was an event, and the Sukkot was an event. People don't pay to attend the events necessarily. Sometimes he has ticketed events where he'll bring in people from out of state, and then like you'd go to a concert and you pay for a ticket. It's the same idea. So sometimes he does that, but sometimes, people just go to these events, and then he'll call them up and he'll say, hey, I have this new initiative. I want to get more mezuzahs into this part of the state. Will you help support me? And, people will give funds to make that happen. Again, some people are in Montana and some people are in New York and LA. There are people all over that, that he knows that he calls on to help support his activities.
So in other words, it's just like every other synagogue. So again, one of the myths that we came to Montana with from our friends was this belief that Chabad is this enormously rich organization in New York, and it just sends millions of dollars to everywhere else. And I don't know if you've seen the movie. If you've been, we were at the national headquarters of Chabad, and it looks like this seedy junior high school from the 1920s. It's this awful old building. So that is just not true. That's not where the money comes from.
Okay. Gina Goldman wanted to know if the kids went to secular or religious school. Do you know? I know the older daughter was going to a yeshiva somewhere in another state, but the other kids, do they go to secular school or are they schooled at home?
They do. They go to secular schools. You know, Chaim's gotten that question before, and you know, he said, in the perfect world, they would go to school in the Chabad community in New York, but that's not where we are. That's not where we live. That's not where our family is, and that's not where our kids are. So they really put their children first, and their kids all go to the public school system right now, with the exception of Shoshana, who was going to yeshiva, but they ended up, that wasn't working out for her, and she's got some trauma stuff going on from her childhood, and so she ended up at a school in Utah, like a equestrian, you know,
therapy for riding horses,
a therapy school,
and taking care of horses.
Right. So you know, that's definitely an issue for him, and he wishes it were otherwise. I mean, there are camps that they attend, religious camps that they attend, and you know, there are online classes that they take, but you know, they are very much a part of the community in Montana, in the sense that the kids are integrated into the school system.
Were the children adopted from Montana, or did they come from other states? The children, were they adopted? Were they born in Montana?
All over.
All over.
One is an immigrant child, probably from the Soviet Union somewhere. So Chaim is very interested in immigration issues. You know, he's, as you might gather politically, he's all over the place. As he himself says, I'm very right-wing on Israel. That's a quote from him. But on other issues, he is on the liberal side, and which is one of the reasons we find him fascinating, is that you can't quite pin him down. Any kind of stereotype doesn't quite work, including if I go back to the not shaking hands. Well, is this guy this, you know, patriarch? Well, he turns out as a father, he is incredibly involved with his children. It's not like his wife does all the work. He did not let us shoot. We went all the way to Montana, and he didn't let us film 2 days because he was taking the kids to school and back. That was more important to him, driving his kids to school, than making our movie. So a very contradictory person, and we like that.
Yes. June Schechner wants to know if Montana is open to mixed families. One of the children was a different race.
Well, if Montana has very few Jews, boy, does it have very few people of color. So I think everybody loves Mene. He's a character, and he's popular at school, and so I don't know what you can really say, because there's so few black people there to even figure out how Montanans feel about them. It's all abstract. It's not people walking around on the street.
Right.
But I mean, obviously he's embraced, and I think he's made to feel like a fine in Montana. Actually, Javi has a blog, and as the Black Lives Matter movement has sort of been gaining steam again, she's been writing about this issue about raising an African American son, and she talked about flying into Florida. This was maybe like a year ago, before COVID, and with Mene seeing all these African American people, and basically sort of his eyes were wide open, and she said, she was asking him about this experience, and he was like, wow, I've never seen so many black people. And there was something, I think, about that experience that opened her eyes. So anyway, she's quite a person. It was an interesting, I think when we were making the film, she was at a point in her life when she was, had 3 very young children at home, and had was not able to give us the access that we had hoped to have. But she's a much more public person now, and she's active on Instagram, and she has this blog, and she's very opinionated and very comfortable sharing her ideas. So it's been wonderful to see that, and I wish we could have captured more of that in the film. But she's there in the film, just not as much as I think we would have liked.
And she went on a yoga retreat to Mexico.
Right.
So
yeah.
Okay. Oh, do you know where they get their kosher meat? Is there a kosher restaurant there?
No,
Kosher, kosher store?
I think Chaim jokes about this because it almost looks like they're drug dealers. He and a bunch of other Jews from Bozeman stand along a highway every several months, and a truck comes along and delivering kosher food from Minneapolis. And they have a big, big, big ice box, and it's just filled with kosher food because when it comes to Shabbat, there's this immense meal of kosher food, which miraculously comes from somewhere. So that's it. There's nothing kosher there are no kosher restaurants in Bozeman. He's hoping for one someday. We went with Chaim to a kosher barbecue in New York City, and he ate his way through the food even faster than I did. He was so excited.
Can we comment on, so Eileen sent us a private note, and so I want to make sure that we
please do.
Comment on that. So she's objecting to the word seedy. I think maybe seedy is the wrong word that Jerry used. It's not seedy. It's just not, it's not these lush chandeliers and all these fancy, gigantic. It's not like a university office where you'd go in and you'd see, these beautiful old furniture and that kind of thing. It was very modest and very comfortable and very welcoming, but modest, like an elementary school or something like that. So I would say maybe seedy is the wrong word.
I take back seedy. I don't mean that in any bad way, because it was very welcoming and we liked being there. But it's just anybody's idea of this great palace just architectural palace with all this money being handed out is just not at all what the Chabad headquarters is.
I mean, some of the spaces were quite, again, modest but beautiful. So, like you talk about this old townhouse, that's true. It's this beautiful, you see it in the movie too. It's this, brick exterior, and it is quite lovely. And getting access to Rebbe Schneerson's office was very moving. But again, it was very minimalist. It wasn't, very simple, lots of books, and not grandiose in any way.
Yeah, the interesting, I think I've said this before, but the people who are there's a library, a Chabad library about the Rebbe and his teachings and his beliefs, and when the people learned that we had this footage of the Rebbe, of actually the Rebbe's, both his resting place and of his office, they were so excited that we passed it on to them for their archives, because it's so rare. We were really privileged to be allowed in there. Wow.
Anybody have other questions? I had a question on another tangent. I read online that Ed Staffman, one of the rabbis, was running for the House of Representatives. Do you know anything about his campaign? Did he win? What's going on there?
Well, well, as you gather, Ed is a extremely liberal Democrat, and actually Bozeman is a Democratic city. Montana is eastern Montana is 9-1 Republican, and western Montana, kind of a triangle of cities, including Missoula and Bozeman, these are the university towns, are the liberal places. So he was, I think, unopposed as the Democratic candidate, and in fact, there's not even a Republican candidate, there's a libertarian running against him, and Ed cautiously believes he will be in the legislature, and we are very excited about that because Ed is such a wonderful, articulate spokesman for especially immigration questions, and so we look forward to his election. Yes.
Maybe that can be your next documentary.
Yes.
He would like that.
He would very much like that.
Yeah. But we're for Ed for office, for sure.
Let's see. Going back to the Chabad. Synagogues charge dues, have building funds, and charge for Hebrew school. Chabad doesn't. Did you speak with anybody that's like is talking about defecting? That you're using the words from mainstream congregations. Is there? I know that there's competition, but did you see it? Are people actually leaving their synagogues to go to the Chabad, or do they do both? Are they part of Chabad's, community, but they also then go to their own synagogues?
Yeah, by and large, this was a shock to me coming from Boston. They felt very comfortable, the community coming and going in any of the synagogues. So that was like kind of blew my mind, and I think is a good model for a lot of us to not sort of stay in our little lanes and to be open to different ways of thinking and different ways of worshiping. I mean, there were some people in the film that we did interview who really aren't like Catherine. She's not comfortable with Chaim. She serves with him on various things. She likes him as a person, but in terms of being her rabbi, it just doesn't work with her ideology as a human being. And there may have been other people that felt that way. I mean, Amber talks a little bit about how she feels like she can't fully be her authentic self because she's a cantor, and she can't sing in a Chabad service. Now she also is friends with Chaim personally, and she ends up talking to him on the street in a different scene and is very friendly. But so I think there are people who choose maybe not to attend, but I think mostly people seem to really like Chaim. He's so charismatic and so outgoing that he seems to be generally pretty well respected by both Jews and non-Jews. But he is, we were on a call with other Chabad rabbis, and he can be pretty provocative for a Chabad rabbi. He took out a huge, you see it in the film, he took out this huge billboard that says, "You bet your tuchus there are Jews in Montana." And the other Chabad rabbis on that call were like advising him, do not do that. That is a bad idea. But he hired a marketing agency and they helped him come up with that, and it worked for him. So, he and Javi, I think, found their place, that Montana is a pioneering place and they are pioneers within the Chabad community. Not that there are other Chabad rabbis that are not, but they very much are. And so it works for them. This community really works for them.
Well, this has been absolutely wonderful, and we're going to ask one last question. How has your film been doing on the Jewish Film Festival circuit?
I'll take that.
Well, I think really, really well. We were, so we started at the San Francisco Jewish Film Festival a year ago, last August. That was our first screening. Now it's a year later. Obviously, COVID knocked us off the platform of our pedestal for a couple of months, but now film festivals like your wonderful film festival are returning, and people seem to want to show this film. And so, so we're very, very happy. We think it's successful, and I guess from hearing the people tonight, a lot of people like our film. So every time we hear that makes us happy. And by the way, this is a wonderfully articulate group of people who are attending your film festival. I lived many years ago in New Jersey. I was a professor at Rutgers University, at Livingston College, Rutgers. I lived in Metuchen, so I'm glad to be among all me as an ex-New Jerseyan among today's New Jerseyans. So really
Awesome.
Excellent questions. Very good.
And is there any place that we could see you guys coming up? Do you have a new film or a new idea that we can?
We do have a new film idea. It actually involves Alan Setcher, who's the elder rabbi of the state. He was a very political rabbi, and he was part of 16 rabbis that were called to St. Augustine, Florida in the 1960s to help integrate St. Augustine. And he's the last living and lucid of the rabbis. And he asked us, will you please tell this story? And so we're trying to figure out, how to do a socially and safe, socially responsible and safe interview with him in Montana, because we can't go there because COVID numbers are going up in that state as well. So we're working on how to interview him remotely right now. I don't know if you want to say anything else.
Yeah, but we're also, of course, as all independent filmmakers, we're looking for funding. So this would be a film about Jews and Black people together, which is really important in our time. And just again, to repeat what Amy said, this was when Martin Luther King invited 16 rabbis to help him in his campaign in St. Augustine. And very few people know about that. Everybody knows about Selma, etc. But to know that rabbis spent several days in jail, arrested by the local authorities, and it's a magnificent story of Judaism, and we'd like to tell it. So if anybody wants to talk to us about helping sponsor this film, we are...
Or get involved in some way. Where you can reach us at therabbigoeswest.com through our website, therabbigoeswest.com. And there's our email address and a contact form and all that good stuff.
Well, we certainly look forward to whatever you have next. And thank you again for joining us. And everybody can now unmute and chat, which I know you all like to do.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming.
Wonderful.
There was this movie on Rosenwald, who was the head of Sears, and it might be for the filmmakers, it might be useful for them to see it because of the immense influence that he had relative to the African American community.
Thank you.
Great.
All right.
He was
Thank you
also
all.
one of
Have
the-
a great night.
Thank you, Sarah.
Pleasure.
It was
See you next
wonderful.
time.
See you soon.
Really
Bye,
good.
everybody.
Really good.
See you on the next
Bye.
one.
Definitely.
Everybody. This week, we have a hot week, everybody.
We do.
Hot movie week.
Hot
Bye-bye.
movie.
What happened to you? Where are you, Gina?
Where am I? I'm home. I actually have power. No one else in Livingston has power.
We have power.
A lot of people are out. I'm surprised at how many people are out.
All right. Goodbye. I'm shutting us down. Have a good
Bye,
night.
Paul. Bye, Sarah.